Hello and welcome back. In the last couple of lessons we've been looking at side effects, and we got into a bit of a pickle in the last lesson where we mounted this center button so it appeared on the screen. We clicked on it, which registered an event listener, and then we unmounted it so it disappeared, but we had no mechanism for removing the event listener when it unmounted, and consequently the event listener stayed in place even though the center button had disappeared and was long gone. So in this lesson we'll learn how to solve that problem, but more importantly we'll learn how to work with side effects in React more generally. So to start with, I'm just going to tidy up the center button code. We're not going to require this handle click function any longer. We're going to go about solving the problem in a different way. And that means that handle click won't be called by the onClick handler. Instead, I'll just call set active. This is the setter function for the active state variable, and I'll just pass it a transformation function which receives the existing value of active and it returns the negated value, so it'll flip it from true to false and false to true. Another thing I'd like to do is to take this expression. At the moment you can see it's being assigned to message, and then message is placed in these curly braces. The message is superfluous really, we don't really need that variable. We can just put the expression straight into the curly braces. And with that we've got a nice small compact function to start working with. Let's have a quick look at it running. We can see that the blue button mounts and unmounts the amber button, and the amber button toggles between active and inactive. Now, just to define some vocabulary, this component function between the two curly braces, I'm going to call this the function body, and I'd like to keep track of when the function body is executing. So I'll put a console login here. I'll say body starts, and then I'll put another one in just before it returns. I'll say body return. Now, the rule in React is whilst the component function body is executing, we're not allowed to introduce any side effects. But React does give us a nice way around this, and what we do is we put our side effects into a function. So I'll just create a function, call it effects function. For the moment I'll just again create console log effects, and then we hand that function over to React and say please run my function once the component body has completed. So here we go, we call useEffect, which is React's function for dealing with side effects, and we pass it effects function. Notice we don't call effects function, we just literally hand a reference to it. And also this array contains any dependencies that we'll come on to shortly. And that's all we actually need to do to get our side effects invoked outside of the component function body. So let's just go and see that running. I do actually need an import here for the useEffects. Cool. Now let's pop that up. We'll look at the developer tools, and I'll restart for good measure. So we can see what happened is the body of the function was run to completion, and then afterwards React kindly ran our effect function for us, which wrote effects to the screen. Now, in the last lesson we had this problem where when the center button component unmounted, we didn't have the opportunity to unregister the event listener, or more generically what we would really like to be able to do is to undo or clean up after our side effects when a component is unmounted. And useEffect provides us with a really elegant solution to that. The first thing we do is just write a cleanup function. So I'll write that cleanup. For the moment, just a console.log. And then we return a reference to the function from our effect function. So what's going to happen is that after the body has executed, it will run our effects function, and we will return it a reference to the cleanup function. And when the component is unmounted, it'll execute our cleanup function. So let's go and see all that running in action. So we can see here the body has run, the effects have run, and now if I unmount the component, it runs the cleanup. And in fact, if I remount the component, the whole cycle starts again. It runs the component body, it runs the effects, and again, if I unmount it, it runs cleanup. So the only last thing we need to be concerned with is running our effects when the value of active changes, when it goes from active to inactive or vice versa. And all we have to do is to add active into this list of dependencies. And we can now see that taking place as well. So the effects have taken place immediately after the component mounts. But this time, if I change the state of active, it will rerun the body of the component. It'll clean up after the previous effects, and then it'll run effects again. And if I click on active again, so make it unactive, again, it runs the component body. It then gives you an opportunity to clean up after the previous effects, and then it runs effects again. And I could hit this hammer button time and time again, and it'll just say body start, body return, clean up, and effects. And then finally, when I come to unmount the button, there's a final cleanup. So that's how useEffect works, and that's what we've got to work with in order to register our event listener. So I'm going to bring this lesson to a close, and we'll look at implementing the actual event listener in the next lesson. So I'll see you there.